Hey, it's Andrea. Today, we learn that the appropriate amount of time to mourn the loss of a loved one is about 22 minutes. Kivas Fajo should get into the baby-proofing business. And we ask the question, why does Geordi sleep in his uniform and shoes? Stay with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm co-host Shereese.
I'm your co-host Andrea. Shereese, today we are talking Season 3, Episode 22, The Most Toys, which...
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh, okay. Wow, already. This episode was written by Shari Goodharts and directed by Tim Bond. Before I get into the plot, this is kind of a special one for you, yes?
Yes, I'm super excited to go over this one. I think this episode is so fun. Data is one of my favorite characters, so I'm always down for a good data-heavy episode.
Yeah.
And this one I just found incredibly fascinating. So I'm excited for us to get into it.
Yeah. And I do remember that when we first started this podcast, you created this like really cool website where we had like our favorite characters, our least favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this was your favorite villain, right?
Yes. Kivas Fajo was my favorite villain, and yours was Lwaxana Troi.
Yeah, which I feel like would be no surprise to anyone who's listened to our podcast for more than like 7 seconds.
Who's technically not a villain.
She is a villain, Shereese. She is a villain. God, no, she's an anti-villain, but a villain nonetheless. Anyway. Okay, so why is Kivas Fajo your favorite villain of all of TNG? Just so curious.
Yeah, well, one thing is, I like a good data episode. And I think besides lore, this is probably the only episode I can think of where someone's like out to get data and it's a really good storyline. I mean, there's another episode where there's this woman who's really bitter at data, but that's just kind of painful to watch. It's not like, ooh, what a good villain. You're just kind of like, oh, sweetie.
Wait, what episode is that?
There's this episode where there's a woman she's a scientist. She ends up killing the crystalline entity.
Oh, that one. Okay. Yeah. Yep.
And she's just like really bitter at data. And you're like, you get it, but it's not, it's not the same level as a villain as lore or as Kivas Fajo, because Fajo is not, it's not personal with him. It's just business. And also Fajo is played by Saul Rubinek, who is just like one of my favorite actors. And he plays in another one of my favorite shows called Warehouse 13, which is weird and awesome.
Oh,
so watching,
I don't even think I've ever heard of that show.
Yeah, it's great. It's like they go and find artifacts from the past, like historical artifacts that have like magical powers because of their historical properties. And so it's like they'll find something. It's very sci-fi and fantasy. They'll find like something from Cleopatra and it turns everyone to cats or something like that. Like it'll just be something crazy. And it's these agents who are going around the world trying to discover these things and like confiscate them before bad guys do crazy things with them. And he's the boss. And it's just, so fun.
I feel like that's a show that Kivas Fajo would be into anyway.
I know, that's true. That's true.
It's like rare artifacts, you say.
Collecting. Maybe that's how you got the job.
I really love Saul Rubinek in another favorite show of mine, Frasier. He plays Donnie something or another. I don't remember his last name, but he's a like absolute shark of a divorce attorney. And he is such a great character on that show, but we're just doing a Saul Rubinek spiral now. Here's the plot for The Most Toys. Stardate 438-672.2. The Enterprise is called to assist the colony on planet Beta Agni 2, which has suffered contamination to its water supply. They meet with Kivas Fajo, a trader who so happens to have the extremely rare compound needed to neutralize the contamination. The volatile substance cannot be beamed aboard, so Lieutenant Commander Data is assigned to make several shuttle trips back and forth to collect the cargo. Just before the final trip, Data is kidnapped, and his shuttle is rigged to explode. The Enterprise crews scan the debris and find trace elements matching Data. Believing he's dead, they are forced to leave to continue their mission. Damn. Thank God it was Data who was kidnapped, because if I was kidnapped and was like, the Enterprise is looking for me, and then the woman Varia would be like, no, they aren't. We put all your trace elements aboard, so they think you're dead and they've already left. I think I would just have like 4 straight months of like panic and not be able to think straight and be probably crying in the corner and freaking out and like ripping my hair out. So thank God it's Data who doesn't do that.
You would not make a very cute addition to the museum if you did.
I would not. There would be so much wetting of the pants, they'd be like, oh, we don't want you for our museum at all.
Well, I'm sure they have some kind of like super absorbent space pants that you wouldn't even notice because Fajo's thought of everything.
Maybe that's why they've got those like extra component to their pants that kind of look like riding pants. I don't know. Who's to say? But all right, before we jump in, initial thoughts, Shereese.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've covered them a bit, but just to go more about this specific episode, I think it's really interesting that there might be something like a space collector, someone who just collects treasures from throughout the galaxy. Why wouldn't there be? Assuming people have similar, desires and passions. Aliens have similar desires and passions as humans, which is what we always assume for the show. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense because we can't communicate with each other. Then it's why wouldn't it be? We have people on Earth who collect rare things. We have people on Earth who collect dumb things, but also people who spend a ton of money just so they can be the one who has the last one of XYZ. And so taking that further to say, I'm going to scour the galaxy to look for the last of whatever, to like be, to show my friends that I'm cooler than them or something. I just thought was really interesting.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you mentioned the like kind of like ending up with the most things when you die. The most toys, the title from this episode actually comes from a popular saying from the 1980s that was all over t-shirts and bumper stickers. And the saying was, he who dies with the most toys wins. That's where this was taken.
What exactly do you win?
Life.
And how do you cash it in is what I want to know.
Well, see, you're a reasonable person though. So you would see that.
I wasn't saying that phrase in the 80s. I never heard that before. And I would have asked the same question in the 80s. What do I win?
Well, but I didn't know that was a phrase either because I was I was 6 or 7 when 1990 hit. So I was obviously too young to understand that this was a phrase going around, but it really was speaking about like greed, like he who dies with the most toys wins. This term was actually coined by this super eccentric millionaire, Maxwell Forbes, who is the publisher of the famous Forbes magazine. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, let me do a mini dive on this guy. Cause you say eccentric millionaire. And I'm like, let me know more. He was the publisher of Forbes magazine, as I said, which was all about like the wealthiest people in the world. Just as a little snippet. So his life was riddled with all these like ridiculously flamboyantly rich things he did. But as an example of his famous flamboyance, he chose this Moroccan palace that he had acquired from the government of Morocco for his 70th birthday. He spent on this party an estimated $2.5 million to charter a Boeing 747, a DC-8, and a freaking Concorde supersonic jet to fly in 800 of the world's rich and famous guests, including Elizabeth Taylor, Barbara Walters, Henry Kissinger, who was former Secretary of State, a bunch of state U.S. governors, and the CEOs of a shit ton of like multinational corporations. This party, Shereese, included 600 drummers, acrobats, dancers, and concluded a full-blown cavalry charge ending with the firing of muskets by 300 Berber horsemen. What the fuck? Party favors included a custom engraved Rolex watch for each of the 800 guests.
That's dope.
Take from that what you will, because I feel like
I want to be invited to that party.
It feels like a great Gatsby
cool
party
show. Yeah, it feels like a really cool show. I mean, there's a huge waste of resources and stuff, but if you think about it, it's just scale. Like people throw huge parties without spending all of that money that he spent, but on like an infant, on a 1-year-old, the 1-year-old birthday, and they've got bounce houses and clowns and balloons, and like the 1-year-old doesn't even know how to do anything.
They don't even know what's going on.
They don't know anything. And somebody could spend like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which to me could seem very lavish for that party, but it's a matter of scale. If you've got like billions and billions of dollars, then millions and millions is the same as like hundreds and hundreds or 20s and 20s. So totally. it's just kind of a matter of scale. But I think that party sounds really, definitely very lavish, and also probably a good time if you were there.
Oh my God,
if you were not invited, you'd be like, who is this douchebag ruining our city?
See, I feel like the like sneaky in me would be like, I'm going to dress as a cater waiter and take off with one Rolex watch, and that'll be it. And nobody will even notice.
Seriously. It's missing. Just show up as like one of the acrobats or whatever. It sounds like
I'd be like, I can cartwheel.
Was not super duper secure because he rented a palace and then had all these guests. My thought was like, oh no, don't put all the high ranking officials in the same place. Haven't you ever seen a spy movie?
Yeah, there's a bomb that's going to go off.
Yeah. Or kidnapping or something. But
reading about Maxwell Forbes, I was like, yeah, this is the perfect quote, he who dies with the most toys wins, to assign to Kivas Fajo. Number one, yes, I was equal parts in awe of the ridiculous flamboyance of this party, and as an extension, because it was just a reflection of like his whole life.
Right.
By the way, he had a charter jet. He had his own airplane. And then later in life, he had this like love of motorcycles, and he named the motorcycle gang that he created the same name as he had his airplane named. And the name is the Capitalist Tools. I was like, wow, there's some I guess, because hearing about this party, I'm like, this is fucking cool. And also, this is why we need to eat the rich, because this dude could have solved world hunger like 4 times over. And he's having fucking Secretary of States and Elizabeth Taylor, like whatever. All right. So that's a little bit of trivia I have. I have a little bit more trivia. It's sad trivia about this episode, but I do feel that it does need to be recognized. Famous British actor David Rappaport had originally been cast for the part of Kivas Fajo. And after filming some, but not all of the scenes as Fajo, Rappaport, who had very unfortunately struggled with depression during his whole life, attempted suicide like a few days after he had started filming. So they obviously, because had to take care of, he had to have his needs taken care of. They ended up recasting Saul Rubinek, who happened to just be a huge fan of the show. And as an actor was kind of in the network of new people who worked on shows, and had asked for a tour of the set as he was like passing through town essentially. And they're like, well, how about more than a, tour of the set? And so they ended up casting him to take over the role. Very, very sadly, David Rappaport did later die by suicide just 3 days before the airing of this episode, which is so sad. And select scenes with Rappaport as Kivas Fajo were included in a special in memoriam reel in the TNG Blu-ray set. So you can find little snippets. The makeup is completely different. They had to scale the makeup down
way back because they had less time,
because they had like 2 days to kind of put together a look for him. So it's a very, very sad bit of information, but I didn't think it would be doing any favors to the memory of David Rappaport to not mention it. So, so there it is, which is super sad. All right. On that super sad note, shall we kick off this episode?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we see Data transporting this hytridium from the ship of a Zibalian trader. We've never heard of or seen Zibalians before. Kivas Fajo. And Data, I don't know if you noticed this, Shereese, but Data, the name of the shuttlecraft that Data uses is called the Pike.
I did notice that.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Oh, yay.
And I never noticed ship names, but I was is that called the Pike? I did notice this time.
I feel like it was pretty right in the middle of the ship.
I don't know where they usually are, but I never noticed them. You're always like, oh, that's the such and such named after famous astronaut, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait, I thought it was just number 002. Like that's all I usually see on the side of the shuttle.
Well, I will say, I do love that in real life, many, all airplanes and aircraft and any kind of craft have all like designation numbers, but airplanes and boats kind of in particular have people name them.
Right.
And I love that they kind of carry on that tradition with shuttlecraft where it's like 002, but it's also named the like Pike. Or as you introduced me to Lower Decks over the weekend, which, oh my God, so freaking funny and such a love letter to TNG and so many Easter eggs in it. And
if you have listened to our beginning episodes of this podcast, we both mentioned how we would never watch Lower Decks, and we were wrong because the show's great.
It's amazing. It's
take
hilarious.
It back. Eating words. It's very fun. So as you're watching Lower Decks, you notice the ship names on Lower Decks, which I also did not notice.
all the little shuttlecrafts, and they're all things that are based in California because it's a California, like Cerritos is a city in California. All of the little shuttlecrafts are like the Yosemite, the Kings Canyon, which is a national park here in California. And I'm only in like episode 2. So I'm like, I can't wait to see how they keep like running that gag.
Yeah. And what's funny? There's this episode where one of the characters mentions how she did a prank on Saul Rubinek.
Oh, really?
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, did she just say Saul Rubinek? And I was like, and I had to rewind it. I was like, she totally did. She's like, oh, this was my mentor back in the academy. And I was like, oh, that's so great.
Shereese, I live for like TNG Easter eggs. I really do. I'm sure as a Voyager super fan, there are probably a lot of different Easter eggs that reference Voyager as well.
Yeah. I think the show references like Voyager, the original series, and TNG, but I I've seen primarily TNG references, which is really fun.
Well, that's my favorite
because it's happening the same time as TNG. It's a couple years after the end of TNG show is when this is supposed to be happening.
Yeah. Okay. So the Enterprise's exploits at this point are like universe famous kind of thing. Got it.
Correct.
All right. Okay. But back to our episode. So as Data's preparing to depart with the last load, he's shocked and scanned by this woman aboard the Jovis. She gives him like a little thumbprint thing to like sign off for the last load, and he gets shocked, and the woman
electrifies him.
Yes. Yes. And she immediately starts scanning him like 32% this and that, 37%, whatever. Right. So I'm like, why is she doing a rundown of like all of his components? That was super weird to me until later in the episode where I was like, oh, and the shuttle appears to explode in front of the Enterprise's eyes, which I had a thought about this. Which, you know, I always have thoughts. But if Data has been doing a ton of like back and forth trips to like pick up this hydradium and deliver it to the Enterprise, why would Picard put the final like drop off or the final trip like back on the view screen?
I don't think it was the final view. I think it was all the trips. I think it was the whole experience. They just had been monitoring it. And I think it was on the view screen because they had nothing else to look at. And the whole time Data's been saying, because later on Geordi says that every single time Data did a run, he said he would report in, okay, everything's loaded. Here I go. I'm heading out. And they'd be like, go ahead. And then he would do it and come back. And so they were doing it over and over. So I don't think they were just looking at the last one. But definitely the last one didn't go the way all the other ones did. And just like the look of shock on everyone's face. I don't remember how I felt at this specific scene when I was a kid. But I do know watching as an adult, like I knew it was going to explode. But I was still like, oh my gosh, like, yes. If you see your friend explode, what the heck? Like, it's just very, and then it's just like through stunned silence, they're looking at each other. And then Picard's like, well, we have to keep going with our mission because there's this natural disaster going on and we have to get there. Yeah. But we also want to stay and investigate and see what happened. Is there any way Data could be alive? And it was just painful. It was hard to watch that little scene.
Yes. Well, also there was like an element of like gruesome to it too, because not only does the ship explode, but on the view screen, you see like parts of the ship, like parts of the shuttle kind of like whipping like away. And you're like, oh my God. Yes. Seeing debris. I always think of, whenever I look at this scene, I always think of like, oh my gosh, if I can see chunks and parts, like I don't want to see chunks and parts of a body or like an android body. Yeah, I was just like, ooh, it was super gruesome to me.
But then we go to the bridge and, you know, they're looking at how many resources they have, how much time it's going to take to get to the planet that has this big natural disaster. And Riker's like, we have barely enough hydradium to finish the mission. We have like just enough, like to the drop.
Yes.
We get more? And Fajo's just like, we can't get any more. You know, this is all there is. And we're going to stop selling it ourselves because it's just too dangerous and all this stuff. So they're like, all right, we got to go. Like, we have to go. And it's just really sad because you're like, no, Data's still alive. Don't leave him.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, no. Well, we don't know that he's alive. I mean, we know that something has happened, right? He's been electrified, shocked, and this woman has scanned all his components.
Exploded.
Yeah. And we're like, what the F? Yeah. And then we see the ship explode and the Enterprise has to take off, which makes perfect sense. But then, you know, of course, you and I, having seen this episode a bunch of times, we're like, don't leave, right? Immediately. And Data comes to in this like museum gallery type of room. And I love that he's lying back and his hand and his thumb are still up as though he like frozen in the position he was in when he was shocked, which I thought was pretty awesome. And he's like, what, who, huh? And enter Fajo and his assistant Varia, and Saul Rubinek's performance is so freaking delightful.
It's so good.
I mean, the man just was Kivas Fajo. Like he's snapping, you know, he's doing the like snap to Tessa. He's like, he's little so excited jumps. So excited. And he says, it took great effort to bring you here. Like just the way he's like,
I was like, what is wrong with him? He's like yelling at Data so Data could hear him. And he's repeating himself and he's talking like how he thinks robots would talk. Why? And then Data's just like, are you holding me against my will? And he's just like, oh, why? Yes. You're just like, wait a minute. So he knows he doesn't. Wait a minute. You're right. You're just like, everything with Fajo is like this big joke. It's like life is a game and a joke, but also he's ridiculously dangerous and deadly. And we don't know that at this point either. So right now we're just thinking he's kind of weird and what's going on and why
eccentric
is he
clown. Yeah.
He's just some eccentric clown. And Data's like, what is going on? And Fajo explains that he's brought Data here to be his plaything for his enjoyment and entertainment. And he tries to sweeten the deal of Data being here by saying, you're going to be catered to, your every whim will be delivered, blah, 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 blah. And Data's just like, this is unacceptable, sir. Right? He's like, you can't take somebody against their will. I don't want to be here. I want to go back to the Enterprise. Yeah. And then Fajo just laughs and he's like, well, almost your every want will be granted. That one won't be. You're staying here, buddy. And you're just like, oh. And Data tries to escape, of course.
Yeah, a few times. Or like a few different ways.
And it doesn't work, right? He goes to the door and he's like, I'll just open the door. And he tries to do his super strength, which normally works on every door.
I know. So disappointing when it doesn't work this time. You're like, dang it. But Kivas Fajo has thought of everything. Everything.
Yeah, he says maybe 10 androids, like you could open that door because it's made out of like galvanic steel, no, some kind of steel. It's made out of some special steel that like, and it's super heavy or whatever. Data can't escape that way.
And it responds to DNA, which Data does not have.
Yes, it responds to galvanic skin responses and DNA.
There you go.
Neither of which does Data have. Although he could probably fake a galvanic skin response, like sweating and temperature and stuff, but he does not have DNA. And even if he did, it wouldn't be Fajo's DNA, which is the kind that you need to open it. So this is like a super dope lock when you think about it. Like, I don't think we see this ever again.
You know what this is? The ultimate child safe lock in the universe. That's what Kivas Fajo should be. You know, he's all about making that money, like patent that baby and sell it around the universe because people will give all sorts of money to keep their kids safe.
And biometric locks are usually like fingerprints and eye scans or something, but to actually respond to the DNA in someone's skin, which I would not want because I don't want my DNA being measured and stored everywhere. But the point is, if you could have something like that and you had some like big vault or something like that, like that'd be a pretty cool lock.
That would be really cool.
A few other people with the key. Otherwise that could turn bad. So anyway, so he's like, okay, I'm going to attack Fajo and like take his body over here, put his hand on the little button and open it like they always do in every heist movie. Like,
cut off his hand and pop it on the biometric scanner.
Pop out his eye and do the scanner. They always like find a way. They do. Like you think you've got it beat, they always find a way. And he gets in within maybe like, I don't know, 2-3 feet of Fajo. And then there's some personal force field around him that bounces Data off like a rag doll. And he tells him it's whatever that force field is, it's android specific. It's specifically
it responds to positronic net.
Yeah. And he was like, I wouldn't do that too much if I was you. And you're just like, oh, like he's really trapped. And Maria is just like, ha, 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 in the corner.
Yeah. She's over there with her messed up face being like, told ya.
Easily one of my least favorite makeup jobs I've ever seen.
Yes.
Next to those creepy kidnapper guys, because their makeup was really ugly too.
Okay.
But functional, but ugly.
I had read just like a little snippet of information. I'm sorry I didn't like write down all the correct names and everything, but the actress who played Varia, because it's pronounced a couple different ways on the show. She was supposed to have like antenna that knit into her hair and made kind of like this headpiece sort of thing and all this stuff. And she ended up, the actress who played Varia like doesn't like a lot of makeup,
prosthetics.
Prosthetics and makeup. So she basically went behind everybody's back to Gene Roddenberry and convinced him to have the makeup team like scale back the look, which I feel like as hair and makeup, I'd be like, what the F? We spent all this time working on this is
literally what we do all day, every day.
Yeah.
We know what we're doing. Trust us.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've been crushing it this entire season, every single episode with our makeup.
Yes. Have you seen the benzites? Thank you. Anyway, so
the Bolians, hello.
Oh my God. So she ended up
with
a chin piece. And the way that they kind of wrote it into the show is like the look that like makeup gave her and hair. They gave her like an Annette Funicello hairdo, which was like a 60s, 70s, 80s kind of like big giant foofy 80s. It's so ugly in my opinion. Sorry. But they ended up making her face piece kind of look like a car crash victim. That's what they said was like their sort of inspiration. Mm-hmm. And the way that they kind of wrote that into the show was when she talks about Fajo's like punishments, she kind of touches her face. So you're like, oh, right. It is like scarring. It's not meant to be that way, but it is the worst prosthetic makeup. Oh,
it looks so bad because I remember that like that scene where she says like, this is why my face looks like this because Fajo, punished me. And you're like, okay, but he made your chin fatter. Like that doesn't really.
Yeah. It's like, it has like a square kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they had to add a prosthetic to add in like the
scars.
Yeah. Whatever. Like when it maybe would have been cooler for them to do scars on her face, kind of like those, what was the name of those like pirates, those like space pirates? Do you remember they had like all the boils and stuff on their face, which was gross, but like the makeup job was so good.
Gatherers.
The gatherers. Right. It was gross, but also you're like, whoa, like it was definitely a look.
Yeah.
Probably I would have preferred something like that where she had scarring on her actual face versus a prosthetic that has a scar on the prosthetic that just makes her chin really big. Because I was just like, it's hard to look at her. I didn't. And I don't think she made a good call.
Shereese, you're right. I don't think she did either. I couldn't agree with you more on that. I also think too that like, I remember watching this as this episode as a kid in non-HD. In the early 90s, and it looked like shit even then.
Yeah, it looks the same.
It looks even worse now in like ultra HD, but it looks really shitty then too. Sorry, actress, like you absolutely should not have like made that. Yeah, you would have looked so much cooler with antenna on your forehead. And also, if you despise wearing a ton of makeup and all that, like I get it. I don't. Maybe just try out for a different role because like Deanna Troi wears like normal makeup.
That's true.
Right? Like you could just be she
could be one of the henchmen because there was all the henchmen they just had like lines on their face. I think
they had like a little like doodad on their forehead that looked like a little like
they didn't. Yeah. Anyways, that has to be said because you guys know how much I love the makeup on this show, except for this time. And I also didn't like Fajo's makeup. I mean, I didn't hate it. It just looked like someone just took a magic marker and drew on his face. And I was like, I wonder if back in SD, before it was HGTV, I wonder if that looked not like marker, if it looked any different. But then with what you just said right now of they didn't have very much time, they had to film it in 2 days as opposed to like a week or two.
Yeah.
They did what they had to do. And I do think it looks cool. I think again, this would have looked cooler if the red and blue marker was raised. So if they had put on a little bit of, I don't even know what it is, but the same like kind of gooey stuff that they put on to do makeups, if they would have put like lines of that in color just so it was raised and looked more like a tattoo, but raised. I think that could have looked really, really cool. And I would have been happy with that because the design was cool. It just was like the marker effect kind of reminded me of Tasha Yar. And I was like, nah.
Totally. Yeah. It was definitely because of the like
time crunch
right in the middle of casting. They had to like, you're right in the middle of shooting. They had to recast the role.
But he looked great.
He did look really, I mean, they did that little, like, looks like a Whovian from Whoville, like nose
totally
thing.
Totally does.
Right. Totally.
And
had
his
Grinch
outfit
flashbacks.
Was great. His hair was great.
His outfit, his little hat was so ugly and so freaking perfect. And like the little curls that kind of went around, like that was really, really cool. Yeah. They were trying to make it look like a tattoo, but a different color. Yeah. It totally looked like
a Sharpie.
Sharpie. It really did. But they did the best with what they had. So yeah, Data does not want to be held captive, but Fajo tells him like, you'll get used to it. And aboard the Enterprise, Geordi and Wesley go to collect Data's things because why wouldn't Wesley be there to collect Data's things? Okay. Wouldn't Geordi and like Counselor Troi be doing like this is the place for Counselor Troi to maybe be doing this, right? Like, why is Wesley there?
Data's things?
Yeah.
Well, Wesley's one of Data's best friends, and so is Troi. So it's Troi, Geordi, and Wesley. Because remember, those are the three he invited to meet his daughter.
Oh, you're right.
So those three are his best friends. And right after the explosion, I thought, oh my gosh, everybody needs counseling. Where's Guinan? That was my first thought. I was like, you guys need to go find Guinan immediately.
Troi. They didn't even do that.
So I didn't find it weird at all that Geordi and Wesley were there because they're like, those are, two of Data's best friends. But it was just really sad too, to be like, well, he died like 10 minutes ago and now you're going to clean out his quarters. I don't know how much time for grieving. Yeah. I don't know how much time for grieving is appropriate in future time, but I felt like more than 20 minutes would be warranted. Like a day.
I'm willing to go out on a limb and say the normal time of grieving in future time is also the same as present time and past time.
Well, but everybody's grief period is different, right? So it's more like when when in the rules of Starfleet do they handle like disposing of a body, doing the funeral ceremony, like that sort of thing?
It's usually like, I imagine it's like a couple of days, kind of like it would be here, right? Like,
right. But that's the thing is this is not a couple of days. This is like a few minutes later.
No. Maybe, it's like,
it's like immediately.
The piece of the shuttlecraft is barely still bouncing off the shields. And they're like, all right, let's go through his drawers and get his things.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if on the Enterprise in the future, they would have this like, 4 days or 3 days. And then we do this, this, and this. Cause they have stuff that they do when a crew member dies. But this was like, the shuttlecraft is still sizzling in space. And they're like, all right, let's go clean out his quarters.
Right.
And they're cleaning out his quarters and looking through all his stuff. And it was just like really, really sweet.
It was really sweet. So Geordi and Wesley go into the quarters. They look at this art piece that Data had painted. And he was like, he never thought, Geordi or Wesley was like, Data never really thought this was like complete. And what like a perfectionist he was. And I looked at that painting and I was like, meh, Shereese could have done that in like 10 minutes.
That's false. I cannot have done that painting, but it was very pretty. It was like this blue cave or wormhole or something.
Yeah, I felt like it was kind of like a dream swirl or something.
It wasn't necessarily space, which was like, what? But it was very cool because Data, he does this like self-expression through art, which shouldn't be possible for an android who can't, so that was amazing and sad.
His violin and bow were on the little like seat. And I went, no, Data would have always put that away.
Yeah.
Every time. No. So I was like, although set dressing, so whatever, but I was like, no, that's not consistent with Data, but whatever. But they do find a book of Shakespearean works, and they find
that he got from Picard. From
Picard, and they found Tasha's little hologram where she says, Data. She actually doesn't speak at all. She just kind of looks at him and smiles and nothing.
And they found a deck of cards for their poker games.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. And all of his like Starfleet's highest honors, like all his Medal of Honor type of stuff. And it's sad. It is sad.
Which he keeps in a drawer. Right. He doesn't put it up on the wall like everybody else would for medals. He keeps it in a drawer, but not because he doesn't care about it. He keeps it in a drawer next to his hologram of Tasha Yar, next to the poker, the cards for poker, next to like the book that he got from Picard. And it's like, oh, like he may be an android
drawer.
Yeah, he may be an android, but he definitely has connections, like important connections.
Yeah, he really does. Now, aboard the Jovis, Varia comes in and tells Data that Kivas wants him to wear this like certain outfit and sit in this very 1990 chair. And he's like, I do not wish to be in this chair, basically. Like, I have no desire to sit in this chair. And
I'm going to resist you any way I can, which is like, not sitting in the chair is all I can do at this point.
Yeah. Which, I mean, hey, I get it. Like any single way that you can carve out a teeny bit of resistance, like I totally understand that. So she reveals that Fajo has no moral fiber. He's like, isn't this like immoral to like hold me against my will? She's like, he doesn't have any of that. He has no concerns. Yeah, exactly. The rewards for loyalty are lavish, but the punishment for disloyalty are like equally extreme. And then she touches the horrible thing on her face. And it's like, okay, so yeah, that explains why your face is all messed up. So we're just getting like little tiny bits of information. And we kind of keep jumping back and forth between Enterprise and the Jovis.
Yeah. And there's this great line there where she storms out because he's like not playing along with this game. And Varia is like, just face it, Data. He has you. And Data says, it appears he has us both.
Oh, and you're like, that was such a good burn.
And she's just such a good and then walks away. And it's like, yeah, he does. You think you're hot stuff because you're number 2. But if he made your face look like that, he could do anything to you at any point. You're not a free agent. So
you're absolutely not.
I don't know why you're acting like you're on his team because he's not on your team.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
he
absolutely
didn't say all
not.
That, but it was all implied.
But so now Geordi is like jumping out of his own skin with frustration that he can't explain what happened to Data, right? And that makes sense that would be Geordi because he was first and foremost Geordi, like, Data's like best friend and Data was his best friend. And he's also the engineer and the problem solver. So he is, a friend of mine told me yesterday, he's like, you're the fixer, right? Like you're always trying to, you're tinkering and always trying to like fix things and solve things. And I was like, I feel a little Geordi right now, right? So Geordi is like, what if I try this? What if I try this? What if I try this? Okay, that doesn't work. What if I apply this, right? So he would be the perfect person wondering like what happened, but also, you know, because they were friends. And Picard kind of has to tell him like, look, sometimes things just happen. Like it didn't have to be that Data did anything wrong. And sometimes there just aren't any clues either. Like it just happened, right? Like somebody had a stroke in the middle of a grocery store and it just happened and it's horrible. And it just happened.
Yeah. And that was the thing that frustrated Geordi so much, is because after testing every single thing he could test, he was telling Riker and Picard in Picard's ready room, the only explanation for what happened is pilot error. That's the only explanation. And that's impossible for Data.
Not with Data.
If it was any other crewman, I'd be like, pilot error. But it's impossible with Data. It makes no sense. Yeah. And that's when Picard's just like, yeah, I mean, it's possible though. And he's like, it's literally not possible. And Picard's
but it is.
You're going to have to let this go. And Geordi's like, okay, maybe I am, you know, holding on too long or something, and just kind of goes off really sad.
Yes, Geordi, it has been too long. It's been 43 minutes by our estimation.
43.
Get back to your station, please. Yeah. And they're like, well, we need to replace Data at the con. And Riker and Picard both agree that it needs to be Worf. Why it needs to be Worf? Who's head of security? I don't understand. They always have fucking backup cons, right? Picard strides onto the bridge in the middle of the night to check something. And there's some like ensign so-and-so we never see again. Why does it have to be Worf at the con? I don't get it.
Well, I don't know
very season
that he has to be at the con. I think it's that he's being replaced as number 2, as like the number 2 person in charge of the ship. So like Riker's number 1, Data was number 2. So he's in charge of all the away missions. He takes the bridge when Riker and Picard are unavailable. Like, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. Okay, so now he's
not
being
just like we need Worf to fly the ship, because Wesley could fly the ship.
Yeah,
we don't. Anybody
a boy
can fly
does
the ship.
it. It's fine. Yeah. Okay.
Apparently, I could fly the ship. Anyone could do that, apparently. But yeah,
as long as the con panel doesn't morph to say P for Picard. Otherwise, all the buttons stay the same. We're good. Stupid ass episode. Anyway, all right. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense, because it's like we always have like ensigns we never see again at the con. Why does that have to be Worf? He has other jobs to do, which by the way, he doesn't do very well as head of security. So maybe,
I mean, it's hard to be head of security and always be on the bridge doing. He also does ops, and he does all the weapon stuff like during battles and whatnot.
That seems.
So I feel like
you're right.
The head of security should probably not also be on the bridge doing the ops. He should probably just do security. Like, is what I would do if it was my ship. But you know, it's not my ship. So whatever.
You know, when we create our own starship, that issue is going to be resolved. We'll have other issues, but that one won't be one of them. But anyway.
That one won't be. So we go back to the museum. And what is so funny about this is like Data is feeding the little weird lizard thing. That's one of the collections in Fajo's museum, in his gallery. And like when we first see the lizard, when we first see the museum, actually, Fajo walks through every single piece in it, and he talks about how unique it is. It's the last one of its kind. And then he finds this lizard thing where he says
a lapling.
Oh, there you go, a lapling. And Data says, I thought these were extinct. And Fajo's like, almost. I've got the last one, mahaha. And he's like, and gives him this little worm or whatever.
Yes.
And here in this scene, when we like go back to the museum and it's just Data in there, he's like, Lulu, while he's feeding him. I just thought that was so funny. Like, I
loved that so much. Also, Brent Spiner was using such a different tone of voice that I was like, who's speaking? Oh my God, it's Data. It's like Lulu, which, by the way, a couple of things. The lapling was a hand puppet. So somebody was under there, like, you know, it looked extremely like pilot episode of TNG. It was like really, like puppet. It totally did. But as Saul Rubinek was doing different sound effects throughout, you know, they were shooting it multiple times. There were a few times he was going like, and there were a few times he was saying like, bippy, 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 bippy. And it caught on so much that for the entire week that they were filming this, all the cast and crew was going like, bippy, 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 like to each other, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, Data's like, Lulu, and this lapling is like, right. Yeah. And I love how Saul Rubinek's body language is extremely on character for Kivas, right? He's excited and excitable. He is halting when he's like frustrated and confused. He's totally
eccentric.
Yeah. He's very, he kind of like, he tends to like always like sort of run into the gallery room. And he comes to this halt and he's like, you're still not wearing the outfit and you're still not sitting in the chair. Like what? Yeah. Like, come on, man. And of course, Data is like, I'm going to use every possible method at my disposal to like resist and try to escape. So sitting in that chair is not going to be something I'm doing today. And I love that Kivas is like, fine. And he goes to the replicator and replicates this like drink and then looks like he's going to offer it to Data to drink it, but he ends up splashing it on his uniform and it starts like burning it. And I remember that even from when I was a kid and first saw this, I was like, oh my God, it's like burning all his clothes. My question is, why was it looking all black and burnt looking? Like, wouldn't we see Data's like white torso underneath? Although maybe they didn't want to film like Brent Spiner's torso. I don't know. I was like, why does that look like a crater?
Well, because it's like burning through the fabric. I think that's why the fabric's all like black and burnt. But he says it's going to disintegrate your clothes in just a couple of minutes. But it won't harm your skin. So you'll just be butt naked. And he was like, and I'm fine with that. So I think that's the visual that we're seeing, the clothes being burned and eaten away, as opposed to dissolving, because that visual will be harder to pull off and probably not look as shocking as this, right? This is like a shocking episode. We've got this big explosion in the beginning, and now we've got like acid thrown on his costume. And I remember this too, where I was like, why did he throw that? And then when it starts bubbling and burning, I was like, oh my gosh, it's acid, get it off, get it off, get it off. But then when he says like, it's not going to burn your skin, it's like, who does this? Like, what is wrong with you? And this, by the way, is after Fajo gives multiple speeches to try to convince Data to do what he wants. And he is incredibly manipulative and incredibly effective. Like, this would have worked on a human multiple times over. He tries threatening, he tries, cajoling, he tries guilt tripping, he tries all these different things. And then in the end, he goes to acid, which just tells you a lot about this
Step
character.
3. Yeah. Step 1, cajoling. Step 2, acid.
So then he pours this, and I remember seeing this as a kid also with the acid, because I remember just being shocked. Like, I was shocked when I thought Data exploded, and I was shocked when he poured this acid. And I was like, Data is trapped. There's no way out. And, as an adult, I love a good episode like this where you're like, I can't figure out the solution on my own. How he cannot get out of this little tiny room. And you're like, is Data going to end up being naked? Because like, does he care? Does he not care? I don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
But we don't find that out right away. Instead, we go back to the Enterprise where Geordi wakes up from a nightmare where he goes, oh my gosh, I've missed something.
Okay. About that scene. Why is Geordi in bed wearing his uniform and his shoes? That to me feels like wearing jeans to bed. I'm like, what is Picard the only one aboard the ship who wears effing pajamas? Seriously? Why are you lying in bed in your uniform?
Troy's pajamas.
I mean, she usually puts on like
nighty.
She does. You're right. She does have like a little silk nighty thing, which makes sense. But why the fuck are you in bed in your uniform with your shoes on?
Was he in his uniform though?
He absolutely was, girl. I was like, pause screen. Like, I was like, Alexa, pause. He was in his uniform with his freaking comm badge on, didn't have his visor on. I guess he takes his visor off to sleep, but not his shoes or his uniform. And you've been crawling around in Jeffrey's tubes, getting like dilithium dust on there, and you're just lying in bed. Also underneath, you guessed it, another space painting. I was like, everything is wrong with this scene. Why is there more space paintings? Why? Why do you have your uniform and your shoes on? Okay, little background. I lived in Hawaii for a couple of years, and Hawaii is sort of a mix between like American and like Japanese customs. There's a lot of intermix because it's geographically kind of right in the middle. And one of the habits that I picked up when I lived in Hawaii is that you always take your shoes off when you enter a house and you just go barefoot. That way you don't have like outside shit, all over your floors and then you step on that and then you're in your bed or whatever. So I take my shoes off whenever I get into my house. Seeing shoes in bed, I was like, no, like I was just like horrified. I was like, yuck, 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 yuck. Gross.
Yeah. I never walk barefoot. I never ever walk barefoot. And I think part of that is me being a microbiologist and just, I don't want my feet touching anything on the ground of anybody's ground, even my own. But I don't sleep with my shoes on.
I would hope not.
Like, that is very weird. I I don't know why they made that choice, because they could have easily put him in some space pajamas for the scene. Like,
just easily borrow some of the cards.
I don't know. Or they didn't even need him to have to like wake up from a nightmare. It could have been something else. He could have been in 10 forward and just had a revelation and had to put his glass down and run out, and then he could be in clothes.
That would have made so much more sense. The other thing that bothered me, and maybe this is just a me thing, but you know, the bed has those kind of like space blanket looking sheets. They never have any blankets. It's just like a sheet, but he was laying on top of the sheet, which bothered me, because even if I'm hot in bed, I still need to have just like a little bit of sheet over me, like just a little something. Cause otherwise, I don't know. It doesn't feel like I'm in bed. I don't know. It's weird, but I was like,
I'm the same way.
Okay. Yeah. It was like, you're on top of the sheet. You're in your freaking uniform. You've got your shoes on and there's a space painting looking down at you.
So we're going to say that Geordi was so distraught and whatever. He just fell in the bed and fell asleep. He didn't even get undressed. He didn't even put his sheet over him. Like, he was knocked out. So I wanted to like Control Alt Delete that whole scene. I was like, redo. Yeah, we could have definitely had that in a different way. I didn't even notice all those things at all. I just was like, oh, he has a nightmare. But yeah, you're right. That was done horribly wrong, people. Horribly wrong.
I saw that. I was like, nope, wrong. Anyway.
So the next scene we see Troy and Worf kind of walking through the hallways, and Troy's asking Worf, how do you feel right now? Because this is the second dead crewmate that you're replacing. And I thought to myself, well, doesn't this happen on Klingon ships all the time? Like, isn't this normal? And then immediately Worf says, this happens on Klingon ships all the time. This is totally normal. And I was like, oh. And then Troy says, but this is not a Klingon ship. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Like, and Worf has not served on a Klingon ship ever in his whole entire life. So that's not going to be a big comfort to him.
Yeah. He's only heard like cultural stories about it, but has not experienced it himself.
Yeah. It's not like he's used to everybody around being replaced every day. Yeah. But he seems very well adjusted. And he said, this is how I honor my friends. Like, he's going to honor Data's memory by performing his duties as best as possible. And I thought that was a really beautiful and healthy way to grieve, to like honor someone as opposed to just mourn their loss. He kind of took this other approach of like, I know what they did, and I'm going to just try my best to do what they did and to make them proud.
I really liked that. And I think that is a really lovely way to sort of honor a fallen comrade. Something that I did notice about this scene is when Worf is walking down the hallway, Troy is leaning against a little like wooden hand railing kind of thing that's built into the wall. And she's chatting with this woman, and the woman walks away, and then Troy and Worf start walking. And I was looking at that little wooden hand railing. I was like, have those always been there? I've literally never noticed. There's like a little wooden piece that comes away from the wall. And if you have noticed that those have been there, or if you know that they were built for this episode, please let us know. info@thetngpodcast.com. I've never noticed that, but I'm going to look when we do next week's episode and see if they're still there. And I kind of want to look back a few episodes and see if they were still there, because I never, ever noticed those.
It might just be one of those little things that, you know, just those beautiful little touches that make the ship seem real.
Yeah, totally.
So next we have Geordi going all Sherlock Holmes, and he's explaining to Wesley how none of this makes sense. How it just none of it makes sense. And he's like, we have to, like, there's something going on here. And Wesley's just like, really? Are you sure? I mean, I feel like we've done this already. And Geordi's like, no, we're not done. We're like, I'm going to figure this out, which I love, because this is when I feel like things kind of turn emotionally, where you're like, okay, great. They're not just going to fly off into the sunset and leave Data. Geordi's not going to let that happen. He's going to find out what happened. He's going to convince whoever needs convincing. And at least they're going to go back and take a look. Like at the very least, they're going to go back to the crash site, or maybe talk to Fajo again, like something. And that's all they need, is a little thread of hope to bring them back.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. It starts to like, wait a minute, there are some clues here, because the thing that they're saying is that Data had reported to the Enterprise, like, ready for takeoff, you know, departing now or something. But then once the shuttlecraft actually departed, Data didn't report anything back to the Enterprise. And then there was the explosion, and they're like, it's standard procedure though, to be in communication the entire time. And he wasn't. And that might be explainable for a non-android. Yeah, but not Data. So yeah. Now Kivas Fajo brings in his ultra fucking creepy friend, Paylor Toff, to see Data and show Data off. And that nose thing, makes my
noses all over
skin
his face
crawl. He has noses all over his face, but then he's got this like metal swirl, like a circular metal piece that either goes into or comes out of one of his like
I think
nostrils.
It comes out of like the forehead nose and comes into like the middle of the face nose.
Fucking creepy. Like even watching this yesterday, my skin was crawling. I was getting the heebie-jeebies. I was like, ugh. And then a few times when he was talking, he was sticking his pinky into another nostril. I was like,
he was.
So disgusting. Heebie-jeebies.
I mean, it didn't bother me because for me, it's like small holes, but whatever. Like the makeup was weird, but interesting. And then you compare that whole face to like Varya's butt chin and you're like, what is
happening?
What is going on?
It wasn't so much the holes. It was that something was coming out of it, like a little metal piece that got thinner and thinner. So it's like, it feels like it's going to have a sharp point. And it's just like stabbing you in your fucking nostrils. So weird.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I don't like holes is I think things will come out of them. So for me, like that makes sense.
Yeah. That's super gross. That is a phobia. I don't have the name of what the phobia is, but there is a fear of like little tiny holes that look like infection or something. It's just super gross.
Yeah.
It's super creepy.
But and we'll never talk about that again.
Not ever, not even in the rest of my life, like even off the podcast. But Paler Toph comes in and Kivas and Varya are all kind of hanging on him. And he's clearly a little bit like drunk and just having a great time. And he's talking about this Valorian sex objects that he's gotten with like embedded pearls. And Kivas is like, I already have 4 of those, whatever. And I was thinking like a sex object with embedded pearls. I'm pretty sure you could buy those online anywhere today, but whatever. Like,
but maybe not in 1990. Maybe they were brand new. Who knows?
Maybe. But Data is like rebelling in one of the few ways he can. He is just like completely stock still and totally non-responsive, just standing there, not even blinking, which I felt poor Brent Spiner with those contacts in your eyes and have to film me for like 20 seconds at a time, not blinking. I would be dying. But Toph is like, you have a very interesting looking mannequin. And of course, this is pissing Fajo off. He is not happy with this. Did you notice, Shereese, where his frustration was starting to get the better of him, but he also like didn't want to like lose his temper in front of his guests. So he's like, I command you to behave now. And he still kind of has a smile on, but you can see that like rage starting to bubble. Oof. Yeah.
And then he like hits Data to kind of be like, start acting right. And Data just falls over like a plank. Like he doesn't bend at all. He doesn't move. He just falls over like he is.
That was a hard fall.
Oof. It was.
Brent Spiner.
And he's like, no, yeah, you have to forgive him, whatever. And Toph is just like, oh, this is very amusing, isn't it? So now Fajo feels so embarrassed. He was trying to show off his crowning jewel of an artifact. And now he's feeling so embarrassed, so humiliated, and also furious. And he's just like, okay, let's go back into this other, room or whatever in the ship. And he's like, this isn't over, Data. And you're just like, ooh, Data's going to get it. But also good for him.
Yeah. Data is going to get it. And also good for you. I totally agree. He's like, you're going to regret this. And I was like, oh, damn. Like coming from somebody like
who just threw acid on him like an hour ago. So yeah, you probably will regret it. But
you are going to regret this.
Do.
Yeah. Now the Enterprise finally arrives at this colony system to deliver the Hytridium, and they send down the probe with the Hytridium, and it starts to react. And they're like, wait a minute, this is reacting with the planet's like geothermal system, like much faster than it should be. Like it should take a number of hours to
neutralize,
but it seems like instantaneous
cyanide or something.
Yeah. The tricyanate. And they're like, well, maybe we'll send down an away team and just kind of go poke around. Right. Like we just get it. They don't send down the team yet, but they're like, something isn't quite right. Now Kivas comes back and tries to convince Data to sit in the chair. And he's like,
before he comes in, this part again, I love
the Mona Lisa.
The Mona Lisa is Data's looking at the Mona Lisa and he's trying to like smirk like the Mona Lisa. He's like they're like doing a staring contest. And I just was like, I just love this seeing like Data kind of exploring things. And he's really enjoying the museum. Like earlier we see him sniffing the bubble gum from that baseball card. He's like sniffing the smell, he's feeding the little lizard. He's like enjoying the painting. So he's actually quite enjoying Fajo's museum, which, I mean, why not? He's got nothing else to do.
Yeah, he really doesn't. And I love that he's trying to get that little like mysterious smile down. And it reminded me of the like Lou, like you're doing it, but not very well. Now, Kivas is like, ooh, let me show you a little something. And he pops out this wall safe and enters in this code. And it felt very like I'm at the ATM and I use my hand to shield the like PIN number. And he pulls out a Valon T disruptor, which is banned in the Federation for its like super slow and painful death by like phaser standards. And he points it at Data, and Data's like, it's unlikely that you're going to kill me because of the value that you place on me.
And all the trouble you went through to get me. So not too worried about that, buddy.
Yeah. And he's like, you know what? You're right. And so he brings in Varia and he's like, Varia, how long have we been together? It's been a great time.
Like 14 years, sir. 14 years. 14 years.
Ugh. And he points out to Data, Kivas Fajo points out to Data, like, when I found her, which is like, ew, found, she was barely an adult. And I was like, okay, so you've like groomed this poor woman, which is super gross. And he moves to kill her. And he's like, gonna miss you. And he moves to kill her with the Valon T disruptor, but Data's like, Fajo. And Fajo looks and Data's sitting in the chair and he's like, cool, got what I wanted. Kind of like storms out.
And Fajo at the same time, Varia's sitting there like, oh my gosh, like I almost just died for absolutely no reason. I almost died so that Data could sit in a chair. Yeah. After 14 years of loyalty, of being his loyal puppet. Yep. So it appears he has us both, Varia.
Yeah, absolutely. Now Crusher, Worf, and Riker beam down to this planet and they're in this kind of underground cave. And I totally had flashbacks of Captain's Holiday. I was like, are the Vorgons still standing there watching Vash and Picard dig for hours and hours? Okay. I was like, I just
poor Ferengi is still there. His bones are there with the shovel where he was digging. He dug all the way to the other side of Risa before he died.
So this awaiting finds that the tricyanate appears to be naturally occurring, but it actually turns out it's like this cleverly designed sabotage. And the only way, as they piece together, to neutralize the tricyanate is hytridium. And it was just like a little too convenient that the only person who happens to sell hytridium, which is extremely toxic, extremely volatile, expensive, and all this other shit that makes it like undesirable to have it around, is Fajo. And so the Enterprise is like, oh my God. And I did not remember this from the episode at all. I was like, oh, Data probably escapes and sends like a beacon or something to the Enterprise. But I didn't remember this. This was a twist for me. I was like, oh my God, they realized that Fajo was at the right place at the right time to assist with this disaster.
And that this disaster was made up.
It was made up. Yeah. Cause they were like, well, why would you make up a disaster just to like
cure it?
To cure it. Like,
and Crusher mentions like, there's no reason to synthesize this because the process is so long and slow and so cost prohibitive. Why would anyone make this artificially? But clearly it was made artificially. So they're like, who would go to this much trouble? What would you gain out of it? And that's when they're kind of piecing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And they finally put this into place because they're like, okay, computer, run down on Kivas Fajo, which I feel like you probably should have done before you started doing dealings with him. Just saying, because it took like 8 seconds to be like, collector of rare and priceless artifacts. Data, go back. It's like, how did you guys not do like this 10-second computer rundown?
Even if they did know he was a collector of rare objects, none of that would cause them to think that Fajo kidnapped Data, right?
Yeah,
even if before because they knew he was a traitor. Like that's his job. So
yeah, you're right.
He was a traitor. They knew he had lots of different things, that he had his finger in a lot of pies. He knew who was in the market to buy things and sell things. So hearing that he's a traitor is not suspicious, or hearing that he's also a collector would not be suspicious at all. It's that piece with all the other pieces. It's Data dying, but then Geordi saying, I don't think he died, and here's all the reasons why. And then them being like, maybe, but we think he probably did. But then finding out that someone manufactured this whole crisis just to get the Enterprise to buy the hytridium, just to get them, to go there. And then they were like, it's convenient we had just enough for the crisis and not a drop more. And they came here and find out that it's all artificial. And now they're saying, who's the only one who has something to gain from all of this? And they're like, well, we bought this hytridium from Fajo, but the hytridium that we bought was not wouldn't replace the cost of the tricyanate. So like, what does he really get out of it? And that's when they're like, wait a minute, the only thing besides money, latinum, whatever the heck they traded, is that Data's missing. And Geordi's been going on and on about how like Data can't be dead.
He couldn't have made that mistake that led to that explosion.
Yeah. So then that's when they put it all together and they're like, crap.
Yeah. So they race back, and we find that Data's trying to open this wall safe and extract the disruptor. And Varia rushes in and she offers to help Data escape if he can take her with him. Mm-hmm. And I guess almost killing your assistant of 14 years just to prove some minor point will do that. So she opens the safe and they grab the disruptor and they're off, right? As this is happening, the Enterprise is like kind of locating Fajo's ship and racing over. And as Varia and Data like rush the escape pod,
or to their shuttle bay,
to the little shuttlecraft. Sorry. Thank you. Varia goes to like enter the little cargo bay door code. And she's like, an alarm is going to go off. Like once I like so push the enter key. So we need to be quick about it. And I love that they pause several times in the cargo bay to like chat about little things. I'm like, I thought you said you had to go fast. Like, go. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Like speed.
This is like that episode when the ship was about to be destroyed by something that was melting everything. Do you remember that? And they had the cool Michael Jackson gloves where they were like, we're going to see if it's here. And they're like, scan. It's blue. Scan. Okay, now it's red. And you're like, you have 30 seconds before the ship explodes. What are you
and the computer's doing? Like, 6 seconds until imminent destruction. What if we try pink light again?
Yeah. What about yellow light? Let's go to yellow. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Sometimes they do this on the show. I don't know where the disconnect is, but it's some high tension moment where everyone's super chill. So this is like a high tension moment where they should be running for their lives. And they're just like, so what are you up to? Well, I don't know. What are you up to? No, not the time. Talk about that on the shuttle. Like, let's keep it moving.
Exactly. No,
and she was just like,
couldn't agree more.
We're going to hope that once we get out of the ship, that we can get out of range and get rescued before Fajo comes after us. And I was like, ooh, this is like that person escaping from some fortress and they've got this long no man's land to run through to get to the gate. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, oh, like it's better than nothing, but also you're going to get shot, See,
my immediate thought was you could kind of escape at any time. Like you can come and talk to Data and be like, look, I'm putting together an escape. It's going to take about a week to like plan this, because what you're hoping is that your fucking escape pod, which is going to go 1/4 impulse, is going to be just found by a ship that just happens to be like right there.
Pod. They took a ship. They were taking a shuttle.
I thought she said it was an escape shuttle or an escape pod.
No, it's I said shuttle bay. It's a they're taking a little shuttle, okay. But still, yes, it's the same.
But even still, you take this teeny mini shuttle and you're just hoping a ship is right there. Why can't you do just like a week's worth of planning and be like, Data, just play along to not piss off Fajo for a couple of days. I'm going to send out this like coded distress signal or something. So like when a ship is nearby, then we pop out of the ship and we get beamed aboard. This was just like, we're just going to go out into the deep space and just like hope that in the 10 seconds it's going to take Fajo to like beam us back aboard, that somebody will find us. This just seems like really bad planning.
Yeah, it really totally is, because she also said that they're going to send like a distress beacon. Like, so basically the plan was in the middle of the night, jump into a shuttle, leave the ship after she opens the doors, send a distress beacon, which will, by the way, alert Fajo's entire ship, and then just hope somebody else finds them first. Like that was the plan. And so I mean, yeah, I agree with you. She maybe could have thought that out a little bit more, but maybe she was just not thinking straight because she almost died. And that's probably it. And Data was just like, let's go. Like, I'm not going to stay anyways. I'd rather be dead than be here. Right. So
let's just move out. So she enters in this code and she's right. The alarm goes off like 1 second later. So you get some like security guards that run in and she and Data kind of neutralize them. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, like one of the guards had like turned off the like cargo bay doors. So she has to like run back now to the panel and enter it again. And as she does, Fajo runs in and with his own disruptor that he says he sleeps with under his pillow and points it at Varia and sees her. And Varia is like, fuck, like you're totally caught. And it's one of those moments where like, in the movies, somebody walks in on their husband sleeping with somebody else and he's like, it's not what it looks like. It's like, but is there any room for misinterpretation? I feel like, Varia, you're totally caught, right? Like, it's not what it looks like doesn't work here. And the look of terror on this woman's face is so real. It's like shock and fear and terror all of us. And this is a woman who clearly knows what abuse is. It was like unreal to see that for me. And as Fajo starts pointing his disruptor at Varia, like several moments go by as she kind of is like debating what to do. She's like, do I just stick out my chin and like
take it?
just take it? Do I lunge for that gun that's like down on the floor? Do I scream for Data?
Which, by the way, knowing I won't make it.
Exactly. So she sees this disruptor that she had dropped on the ground, and she lunges for the gun, but misses by like 4 miles.
By miles, yeah.
And then she ends up like standing up, and Fajo is pointing this disruptor at her, like debating whether to pull the trigger or not. What the fuck is Data doing in there? It's suspiciously quiet. The cargo bay doors are not lifting. Varia said she'd be back in 2 seconds. Like,
Data's inside of the shuttle. He's prepping the shuttle. So what they were trying to do was Varia was going to open the shuttle bay doors. Data was going to prep the whole shuttle. And then like, as the doors open, she was going to jump in the shuttle, and then they were going to fly through the force field or whatever. So he had come out of the shuttle to fight security guards. And then he went back in the shuttle to be like, ding, 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 as she ran back to the panel. So they kind of went back to like, all right, we're almost out. Keep going, keep going. So as they're in there, like, he's just in the shuttle and he's not hearing anything. He's thinking she's pushing the little buttons, and this whole scene is playing out. And it's just like, it's really sad because I've seen this episode, so I know what happens, right? But you're just like, he's not a shooter, is he? Like, he said that this disruptor is so painful because it rips people apart at like a cellular level. And it's like the worst way to die. And you're like, he's not going to shoot her. He's just going to like threaten her. He's going to like push her back, or like, tell her to get back in her place or lock her up or something. And then there's even this moment where he lowers his gun and she like sighs in relief. And then he lifts it back up and shoots her. And you're just like, and then as soon as she screams, then Data comes out because he hears her screaming. But it's like, there's nothing you can do at that point. And it's just like, what a monster. And he shot her. He didn't shoot her because he was mad at her, because she was trying to escape, because she stole Data. He shot her because he wanted to see what happens when you shoot that gun at somebody.
Yeah. Yes.
He's a total psychopath.
Complete psychopath, like top to bottom. Come on now. Now Data picks up the disruptor off the ground that Varia had missed by a mile. And Fajo's like, you won't hurt me. Fundamental respect for all living things. That's what you said earlier. I'm a living being, therefore you can't hurt me. And Data is like kind of debating. He's like, I can't allow this to continue. And as he moves to fire, suddenly he's beamed off the ship. And we see the transporter room of the Enterprise, and O'Brien is telling Riker that the transporter has detected this like weapon that's been discharged and has to disarm it before beaming Data aboard. And Data is beamed aboard, like
holding the gun out in front of him.
Holding the gun out. And when asked about this, Data's like, I'm not sure why. Like the sensor would read that, like there was maybe a mistake. And Riker asks him about it. And this is the only time we see, besides the episode Clues, this is the only time we see Data lie. And in the episode Clues, he was lying to save the crew. Here, he's just lying to lie like a normal human. Like you can really see his humanity showing. But Riker asks him, like, Data, we noticed that a firearm, like a phaser, was discharging. A weapon was discharging as we transported you. Like, did something happen? And Data's like, I don't believe so, sir. And just kind of walks away. And they're like, but we just, you could see the look of confusion in the eyes of O'Brien and Riker because they just saw him holding out a gun as if he was shooting somebody. And they noticed that it looked like a weapon was being discharged. And Data's just like, I don't think so. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, oh my gosh, if they would have beamed him up like 1 second later, Fajo would just be like, atoms, dust in his little shuttle bay. And Data would have been a murderer. And which he said he couldn't, which he said like he couldn't do, earlier when he was talking to Fajo when he was first kidnapped, he's like, I can't murder. But this makes the audience ask like,
murder. He said he hasn't killed anyone yet. Like, personally.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
But he said he is programmed to defend himself and he is programmed to take life, but he just hasn't yet personally killed someone.
Hasn't yet done it. Now, this makes the audience ask, like, would Data really have killed Fajo? And I think that for me, at least, the answer is like a big yes. Right. And even Brent Spiner later agreed that like Data was totally firing the weapon when he was beamed away. Like, and I love that coming from the actor, that to me gives it like more credibility, where I'm like, you are Data right here. Right.
So
like
you say it's true.
No, he absolutely was shooting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't discharge on its own inside of a transporter. Guns don't do that.
Especially when he was like moving his hand to like shoot like right then and there. So it's like, no.
Yeah. He would have totally killed him. And he wouldn't have been wrong because he would have been protecting himself, defending himself, and everyone else that Fajo wants to murder. And like, he
absolutely would have. Now there's this last little bit where Data visits Fajo in the brig of the Enterprise, because they've now arrested him, obviously, and tells him that his entire collection has been confiscated and everything is being returned to its rightful owner. And that was the thing that like made Fajo stop. right? Because he's like, don't count me out yet. I'll have you in my collection again. I had you once, I'll have you again. And he's like, well, your collection doesn't exist anymore. And Fajo's like, you must be really enjoying this. And Data says something
seeing
to the
me in a
effect
cage instead of you, like the roles have been reversed. You must just be enjoying this.
Yes. And Data's like, I'm not capable of enjoying this. I'm just an android. And even after production, now the writers went back later and said, we wish we would have made this a little bit more clear that like, yes, he was shooting the weapon. And at the very end that yes, Data was clearly enjoying it because his response was a little bit like pandering. It's like, I'm just an android, like you said, but Data played it so like he played it so ambiguous, not Data, sorry. Brent Spiner played this like so ambiguously that you're like, maybe Data isn't enjoying it. Maybe he is.
I mean, I felt like, just like I feel like he fired, for sure he fired, obviously. But also I feel like he did enjoy it because otherwise he wouldn't have thrown that line in his face. Yes. And he wouldn't have come to see him because there's no reason to come see him. There's no reason to be like, oh, by the way, your whole collection's being dismantled. Yes. By the way, you've lost everything. By the way, you're in a cage, sucker. Yeah. Like there'd be no reason for him to say that except for to rub it in. Because he could just have easily never seen him or spoke to him or of him ever again. Yeah. And like it wouldn't have affected his day. So, but yeah, that would have been nice to have a little more of that punch at the end of his getting back at him, because as audience members, that would make us feel really good to be like, yeah, you got your just desserts. Yeah. Fajo, you're going to jail for a long time. Yeah. For all of your ridiculous crimes. Time. Yeah. I don't even know how that. No. Now you're in a cage. Yeah. Literally, there it is. I don't even know how, I mean, I guess Starfleet is going to, be in charge of that. Cause that's the other thing is like, how in our world on Earth, when somebody commits a crime in different countries, it's like sometimes you can be charged in multiple countries. Sometimes there's no extradition, whatever. But now we're talking about like galaxy wide. And he's just committed crimes everywhere he's gone. So yeah, oh no, all over the place. The light of day, that's for sure.
Now, as this episode is over, I have one last little teeny tiny bit of trivia. In a scene that was present in the script, but not in the final episode, Fajo had sent Varia to test Data's sexual abilities. That's However, Data learns of the intent ahead of time, leaving Varia utterly humiliated, which would later fuel her desire to betray Fajo, like in that climax. It wasn't the shooting, the like, I almost killed her just to make a point, and now she's turned. Yeah. So I thought that was really good that they didn't include that, because I would have been like, nah, we don't need android sex. Stop trying to give me the android sex. Sure. I don't android sex
and also selling women's bodies for your own. Like, can we just get away from that? Like that's been done. We had all of Risa. Like, let's move on. Let's try something different. So I'm really glad they didn't go in that direction.
So final thoughts on this episode.
It was just so fun to see Saul Rubinek as like a freaking 20-year-old or whatever. Like it was just so fun to see him. I love that this episode was a whole kind of like whodunit mystery, kind of mixed with this cat and mouse game. I think it's a super interesting concept. Now, when I watch this episode, it makes me think of that like collector guy from the Avengers movies. Whose name I don't remember. But like, I hate that it reminds me of that guy because I think that guy's really dumb. And I really like Kivas Fajo as a character. So I hate that that's in my brain, but it did remind me of that. And I think that this character is super just fascinating. The whole plot of this was super fascinating. What about you?
It was a really fun episode. I enjoyed kind of like relearning like the way that the Enterprise figures out like why this like hytridium and tricyanide reaction was even happening, like why they were well placed to be within Kivas Fajo's range, like because Kivas Fajo had said at the beginning, like I've gone through an enormous amount of like time and expense to acquire you, which I just thought was like, oh, you're trading with the Enterprise or selling something to the Enterprise. Data is sending this back and forth on the, he's going back and forth on the shuttle. You spotted him and you're like, oh, I want him for my collection, not realizing that he had spent like weeks and months planning this whole ruse to like get him, which is pretty interesting. So I thought that was really fun. I really enjoyed it. And Saul Rubinek fucking crushed it as Kivas Fajo. He was eccentric and crazy and wild and like unstable and just all the right kind of like fun villain that you like love instead of loving to hate. Next week, we are talking season 3, episode 23, Sarek. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.